You're already there. Hi. In this interview, Geepaw is talking about how working as an actor from an early age has influenced him. Two, how his early mentors, what they taught him, what mentoring was all about. Three, how we're currently living in a very dark place and how that influences us. Four, the risk of coaches who are so caught up in being right instead of trying to help people. Five, how his own house is an open place for teenagers to hang out with. Very interesting conversation again. Take it away. I'm Yves Hanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it. Good evening, or at least for me, it's good evening. Welcome. Well, I'm always doubting. Should I say G-Pod? Should I say Michael? It's what's the best
Yeah,
way to introduce you?
yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? In the trade, I'm mostly known now as Geepaw, and people casually call me Geepaw. My wife doesn't call me Geepaw, but the name is. I mean, I look like a grandfather now. I'm a grumpy old man, but I got that name when I first became a grandfather. I was just 31 years old, and so it was actually a kind of affectionate but teasing nickname. It was their way to point out that even at 31, I was already a little old grumpy man. And now I could officially be one because I was an actual grandfather at that early age. And so they started calling me Geepaw, and all the kids grew up calling me Geepaw. And when I had to go out and, announce my name everywhere as a person who does what I do, I just stuck with Geepaw. It
That's
doesn't matter to me either way. It never bothers me either way when people call me.
but that's indeed how I know you and how I usually address you.
Yeah.
Um, so that's it. And I said good evening, but for me it's evening. Well, almost evening. It's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock in the evening. What time is it on your side?
It is 1 o'clock here. I am in the state of Virginia on the eastern coast of the U.S., and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous April afternoon. In fact, this where I'm sitting is my workspace and my table, and it's on casters. And when we're done with this recording, I'm going to move it outdoors, and I will sit outside for the rest of the day doing my work out in the air and the light.
That sounds wonderful. And actually, I wanted to show, with the little help of our friends from Google.
Uh-huh.
So I'm in Belgium here, and that's somewhere here. Actually, this is a very old picture because my house is not yet on that picture. And you're here, and then asking a little traveling around the world, and you're somewhere there in Afton, somewhere in that environment.
Yeah,
That's correctly.
that's
That
it. I'm a little bit further away from the big highway that's going across the screen, and but you really, even this time of year, you can hardly see my house. I live in the forest, and so there's a lot of trees, and even though they're all still pretty nude, they don't have their leaves yet. It is still very hard to spot my place.
but yeah, well, we don't need to have the exact location. Of course,
Yeah.
we don't want to help stalkers, but it just gives an idea where you are indeed. Eh?
Yep.
That's the nice thing. And let's bring you back on screen. Let's hide this again. So, well, Jeepaw, tell us a little bit about you. What you want people to know? We already know that you became a grandfather at an early age. What else do you want people to know
Um,
about you?
I don't know. I am. Uh, I love this thing that I do of making content. It is what I started about 5 years ago. Of course, I had made lots of content before in my life, but I started about 5 years ago trying to turn it into my full time thing. What I did all the time:
Mm.
write articles, shoot videos, roll code in public, all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of where I'm at. I after teaching for a long time and then becoming a coach for a while, for almost 20 years even, I'm like, I really just like talking and writing and reading and studying and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I do. I in our prep questions, you'd asked me what's something people don't usually know about me that is true and has
Exactly.
influenced me. I grew up kind
That's
of.
that's that's the first
Oh, there
question.
we go. So I'm jumping the gun. I don't know. Am I in a hurry?
No, but that's fine. I wanted to see if there was something else, because I think what what I think you already shared just before. Well, let me hide the question. But what you shared before is, of course, you're an agilist who's from the technical side. Yeah, you help people and you share a lot of content, and I think it's one of the things. Well, in a sense, when you get a little bit older, it's also important to share all the knowledge that you have gathered over the years. And I think many people can know you, like you say, from your blog and from, well, for everything you shared on your website and what you share on Twitter, which two things that we'll share later on, where people can find you. But that's where you're from, and then indeed that brings us to that first question: what is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced in who you are?
I grew up kind of on stage. I started acting in live theater when I was 6 years old,
Wow.
and I was in between somewhere between 4 and 8 productions, not necessarily in, but active on a year until the time I was 20 years old, and it not only, of course, was it a lot of fun, it was tremendous fun, but I learned a lot about stuff that I might even think of as life lessons that have
Mm.
have influenced me tremendously. You know, the importance of practice, the importance of attending to detail in everything that you do. The being deliberate. Actors are very deliberate people. We do what we do on purpose. The importance of what's that Mark Twain quote, right? The difference between the wrong word and the right word is the difference between lightning and lightning bug. And
Mm.
and so the importance of individual words and the layers and tones that they bring, all of that stuff. And then of course just performance. You know, if when you perform, you're you're putting it all out there and it's all visible to everybody, and you have to have the energy to do the performance, and you have to have the calm to remain unhurt by anything that goes wrong.
Yeah,
So it's
because once you're on stage, once you're busy, things will happen, and
yep,
then you have to act as if it's planned or whatever, that most of your audience wouldn't notice it. That's the kind of thing.
yep,
But before you go there, you probably practiced for weeks, months, I don't know how many times. So yeah, that's really nice, because you do that preparation, you practice a lot, and then you go live on stage. Anything can happen. You have to react,
hmm
and your co-actors will react in a different way, and you have to kind of understand where you're going with the production.
absolutely,
That's
yes.
so that's and how does that influence you in who you are in as a programmer, for example?
I practice. I write a lot of
Mm.
code, and I write that code over and over again. I'm not
Oh.
I'm not driven by the need to uh, uh, constantly add new things to my software. I'm more driven by the need to get what's there right, and so that's an aspect of it. Of course, you can't be a professional geek at any serious level unless you're a good collaborator, and the theatrical life is all about collaboration, and it's not the kind of collaboration where you love everyone and agree with everything everyone does. It's the kind of collaboration where you have you have to figure this out together. You have to figure out how you're going to work together, and
And when you say
that's
you don't like everyone, it's because there's a lot of ego in acting, I assume as
sure
well.
it is. But it's also just personal styles, right? I mean, you and I meet people all the time that you know I don't like this guy. I still have
Hmm.
to work with them, and I still have to find a way to communicate with him and collaborate together to do things. And that is certainly it was the acting life that certainly showed me first how to do that. Um, the part of my life that is not so much geekery per se, but change. The part of my life that is about coaching and mentoring people. That too is underpinned by the knowing the right words and saying the right words and struggling to find little openings through which people can take little steps to get closer to who they are. All of that stuff is coming from that theatrical background, or maybe it's coming from whatever internal drives I had that led me to that theatrical background to begin with.
Hmm. And yeah, especially when you shared that you did this at a very young age, I assume at that moment that you didn't have a choice in who you worked with, because yeah, it's probably more the more grown up people who made decisions, and so you were
Yep.
forced probably even more to, well, to work with people that yeah, you didn't have the choice, of course. That's it's. I assume it's only the big famous actors that can have kind of a choice with
Right.
who they work,
Right.
and
I mean,
even
I think
there,
that's true.
yeah. And
Although,
it's the same thing in development life, I assume.
very much so. Maybe one more piece of it. Now that you
Mm-hmm.
got me going, I just go and go and go. I had two tremendous mentors. I grew
Oh,
up in a small
okay.
town in Kansas, and the theatrical community was very small. And I had two mentors who of course they taught me so much about how to be, how to grow up and how to act and the technique, but also just how to do anything. But
Mhm.
the thing that I think of them so fondly for now, and one of them has passed, but the other one I talk to a couple times a year. He's a very sweet man, and the thing that more than anything else they showed me is what mentoring is about how important it is to have people who actually don't really need anything from you. They just want you to be happy. They just want to help you discover who you are, and put you in a safe space, and let you break all the rules you want. And that was profound. That was a profound experience for me. So now that and I say now, the last 25 years that I've been coaching and mentoring, that's a lot of what I aim for. And it's not because they told me you should do this. It's because they did it.
And you
And
saw it
it
in action with yourself.
Yep. Yep.
That's wonderful, and especially if you can have that kind of experience at a very young age, doing something which I assume you loved, and
Mm,
having someone then guiding you, or even two people, that's wonderful. And
yep.
for me, that kind of brings us all almost automatically to that second question, which probably is already kind of answered, but still, if you had not been to IT, what would have become of you? Is there something else than acting and IT? Is there something in between, or how did you move from one to the other?
I don't know. I think that I would. So I wouldn't be an actor. I'm not good enough. There, the reason I gradually stopped acting when I was in my late teens, early 20s was because I came in touch with people who were so fabulously good at it that I could not play in their league, and it felt like acting with me would hold them back. If I
Okay.
competed with them and I by chance won a part that was a part that they wanted, I would feel bad because they were clearly better at it than me. So I would probably not be an actor. Um, what would have become of me? I don't know. I'd probably be in jail. But what would I rather have been doing, or what might a career? Um, I'm a very bookish, dorky sort of person with lots and lots of interests in lots and lots of different areas. And consistently throughout my life, some of my greatest intellectual influences have been men and women who were classicists, who studied ancient Rome or ancient Greece or both. And and I would probably have tried my hand at that because I love that period. But it isn't that they taught me about that. It's that you know come across guys like Nietzsche, was a classicist. There are historians I read who are classicists who write about the Civil War in the U.S. And it's just that it's something about the training that they went through, or something that just seems to make them shine as writers and thinkers. And so that might be a goal of mine. Now, would I ever have pulled that off? I doubt it. I doubt it.
But that influenced you also in a lot of things, I assume, also because thinking about all these different things, and I assume also reading, because when I'm hearing the way you explain it, it's a lot about reading and other things. So that brings, yeah, already multiple parts or multiple facets of who you are. Very interesting, very interesting. Could you share some more about how did you move into IT? Because it feels for me that's interesting with everything you shared so far. Is there, how did you run into IT?
What happened was I I got involved with my boss's girlfriend.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't know whether you're aware of this, but bosses can and will fire you if you have a
Probably.
relationship with their girlfriend. And so I was fired, and I was living with my new girlfriend, and I needed work, and I was a salesman, a reasonably successful salesperson. I could sell anything really, and so I had to find a job, and I found a job selling computers. I went to this place, and the guy took a liking to me and me to him, and he gave me it was the Howard Sam's microprocessor architecture book, and he said, "Read this, come back in a week. I'll ask you some questions, and we'll see what happens." And I read it. I loved it. He asked me some questions. I got the job. But what happened was, this was 1981. Of course, computers were selling themselves in 1981, right? And it was not a hard job to sell a computer.
Everybody
So what I
wants
would
to have
do,
that blue thing.
yeah. So what I would do is I'd make my calls from 9 to noon, and then the rest of the day I'd handle walk-ins, but there weren't that many walk-ins. And then from noon to 9 at night, I just played with the computer. I played games. I learned to program. I just did everything to find out, to learn about what was inside these computers and how they worked. And I eventually I got interested in the programming language Forth, and I started using it. And nobody's really ever heard of Forth anymore, but it's a beautiful language, and I got pretty good at it and started a Forth interest group out of the store that I was working at. And one day a guy said to me, "Do you think you could write a Forth?" And I said, "Sure." Complete lie. Complete lie. I said, "Sure." He said, "You think you could write one in 6 weeks?" And I said, "Sure." And I became a programmer. And I did write it in 6 weeks. Forth is a pretty easy language to build from scratch. And what I did, in addition to writing the various apps that organization did in Forth, I ported. I spent, in those days, right, a new CPU or a new box and a new operating system would come out every quarter. You'd get two of them, and we had to move our software onto them to keep up with the market. And so that was a primary part of my job, was being the guy who actually implemented Forth over and over and over again on, I don't know, probably 50 or 80 machines over the course of the next couple of years. Um, that's how I
You
became a
really got into that, yeah. So
uh,
that
I loved it.
you were able to practice that again because then you had to rewrite the same software for
That's
different
true,
archetype.
actually. That is true. I hadn't thought of it from that point of view, but that's
So
true. And I
that
just love
helps
it.
as well.
I'm a street geek. I have no formal education in computers. I walked in the door and said I could do it, and they said okay. And
And you were able to practice and to actually pull it off in a
yep,
sense.
yep. Now
So that,
I say I'm a street geek. I'm very theoretically inclined because that's just who I am. I'm an analytical person, and uh, and so I studied hard, but not because my job made me, but because I just dug it. It was fascinating stuff, and
well, and I assume in 81 there were not many official courses available, or I don't think it was already taught at university or things like that. That was
right,
rather
very
in the
much less so.
beginning.
Yeah, I think a lot of computer stuff came out of math. I think it was math departments were doing computers, and there
Mhm.
were what it depends on who you believe, but the back of the envelope computation says that there were about 100,000 professional software developers in the world in 1981,
Okay.
and so nowadays there are 26, 27 million, but back then it was still a fairly rare thing.
That's yeah, that's an interesting. Okay, I want to go to that next question. That what do you consider your biggest challenge, or at least the biggest challenge that you want to share? Because there are always challenges that we're not ready to share. But what is your biggest challenge you want to share, and why is that a good thing for you?
Well, I'm awfully tired, and my biggest challenge in these days is just getting enough energy to even get close to who I want to be. And and I don't know. I actually think all of my strengths are weaknesses, and all of my weaknesses are strengths. They all. I don't hold to this idea that you have to, everything that I have that it's good about my character is also bad about my character. It's also a
But
thing that gets me into
I
trouble.
think that's true for a lot of people, but most people don't realize it. I think, but
Maybe. But anyway, so right now, I'm very tired, and so what is the strength? What is the goodness that feeling that way gives me? A certain amount of tolerance, maybe. I don't. I'm out there on Twitter, slinging as much good cheer as I can manage, and encouraging people all around the world who are just, who are, it's one thing for me to be tired. I'm old. I'm almost retired. It's another thing altogether to find a 22-year-old who's tired.
mhm.
And so maybe me being tired is at least giving me the empathy I need to help other people who are in that same spot, because the world's in a dark place right now. Certainly the darkest. These are the darkest times of my lifetime.
Well,
And
if I think about it, indeed, we're just coming out of pandemic. I'm not even sure that we finished the pandemic. We're somewhere. This is April 2022, so this 2 years into the pandemic. Um, that's yeah, definitely. A lot of us were locked up, and in right now in Shanghai, there are really people locked up in small boxes.
yeah,
And a lot of us feel like yeah we feel tired, like you say. I think a lot of people are looking like, what is it? At this moment, we're what 50 days or something like that into a war, or that Russia is doing a war on one of their neighbors. So that yeah, that is a dark time. I think it was about 20 years ago that I thought, okay, we're past that Cold War, we're finished, and now 20 years later, it looks like, oh, we're back into it, and probably much worse.
yeah.
So Yeah, I can understand that many, like you say, many younger people will feel like, what is this place? Do I want to do? We have the climate change that is happening upon to us, not much clear. We have, yeah, I would say, extreme rights popping up in many different countries around the
Many
world.
places. Yep.
You've well, the good news is you kind of got rid of your previous president. I'm not sure if it's completely got rid of, but at least it's a little bit better now than a few years ago in your country.
Maybe.
uh
I
well,
worry that, we're going to go back in the other direction any minute.
yeah, and so that's why I say it's not clear if it's completely gone, but it's a little bit better than it was some years ago. But it might, the needle might turn, because indeed that's what we see in a lot of other countries. So I understand that feeling that you say about feeling tired and about other people feeling tired. Um, and that's, I think, well, maybe the difference, what I'm hearing you say, is that you realize that you're tired. You realize the hard part of that is not just you, but that is also the systemic part of it. That's what I'm hearing. And I
It is.
think a lot of people don't always realize that. People feel tired and they say like, oh damn it, whatever. And they don't realize, well, we're in a dark place right now. uh, and it's good that you share it, and that's indeed, um, well, I think when I watch what you're sharing on Twitter, you can bring some sarcasm, you can bring some of these things, but you always try to look on the things and point out to the people of where things are coming from, and I like that part. Um,
Yeah. I think that it's easy. You're right. I can be fairly biting, and
mhm.
I of course have a filthy mouth, and and all that. So it's I think it it is so easy to confuse, uh, to decide that being a loving and decent and kind person must mean, you know, uh, unicorns farting rainbows. That it must mean,
Always
oh
happy.
yeah, it doesn't mean that, I don't think. And so yeah, I can be pretty crabby. Although I usually am aware that I'm being crabby, and I try not to actually injure anybody. I'm not saying I don't I always pull that off, but I try not to. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, as far as the tiredness thing goes, I don't know who's watching this or where when they eventually see our video, but you know what I'm doing right now? I'm trying to get in 2 good hours a day, and I get there about half the time.
Wow. Okay.
And it's just, at some point, you just got to forgive yourself. You got to accept this is where I'm at. I've not lived my life by only turning in 2 hours a day, and this is a new thing. But it is where a lot of us are at right now. And so you just, if I could tell anybody anything, it would be hold yourself carefully, take care of yourself, because this is a hard time, and you gotta get through it. And the only way to do that is to accept what is happening.
And that's so basically what I'm hearing is you have to be, well, I'm not sure the right word, but compassionate, have compassion with yourself
Yep.
about only what you're able or capable of doing in these dark times. Um, it reminds me of a statement that I like to make a lot. Is when I go on the plane, one of the things they say on the plane is, well, you first need to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Yeah.
And I try to use, every time I hear that statement, I try to think about myself, like, did I really take care of myself enough? Because a lot of us and a lot of coaches, and I see a lot of people there, we care so much about the rest of the world that we forget about ourselves. But we can't. And as a parent as well, yeah, we always want to take care of the children first, but you can't. If you do that too much, you don't care about yourself, you cannot help your children at some point. And that's the same thing for the rest of the world. And having that compassion, like you say, understanding where you are, yeah, I think that's usually. And I like, because like you said, you can be crabby or you can have some of that, but it's always from how would I say it? It's you see what you get with you. You will never be just sunny just to keep people happy, and it that means for me it's real. It's never fake. um, and that's one of the things I liked when I met you, even from the very first time. I remember, I don't remember where anymore. It was at, I know it was somewhere at an agile conference at the bar. I think George
Yep.
Dinwiddie introduced me. I'm not sure. Um, but I do remember that the first 5 minutes, like, what? And then afterwards, you realize, hey, this is actually a person that I know yeah, I know what this means. And that's what I like so much about our interactions, whatever it happens.
Yeah, you got to figure that's 20 years ago. Is it that
Probably
long?
something. No, I don't know. It's yeah, somewhere about 2004, 2005, something like that. So
Yeah,
it's a
pretty
little bit
close.
less. It's a little bit
Amazing, huh?
less.
We've been doing this a long time.
Yes, that's the other thing. So if you want to feel old, that's what we need to keep talking about.
Yeah,
But
right.
I want to go to that next question. Is that what drives you? And because on top of everything else, I do feel that you're a driven person. You want to help people. You want to like you say, you create all this content with all your knowledge. Where is that drive coming from to do all of that?
Well, it's complicated, like everything. It's so partly, of course, what I get out of it, maybe most of what I get out of it is people thanking me, right? People are very sweet to me. People say, "I know you've had this in your life too, right?" Somebody you work with or taught some silly thing that you learned a long time ago that you don't even think of as important will come up to you a year later and say, you saved my life that day when you taught me that I don't always have to walk backwards. I'm like, okay, but and it's wonderful, right? It's wonderful. And people say the most fantastic things to you when you help them. And so that's part of it. Another part of it is I get to perform. And
Hmm.
you can't not, you can't look at yourself and say, oh, it's just because I'm a saint. I'm getting stuff out of this. And so, that stuff is all driving me. Of course, what I would like to do at this point is actually make money doing this, which I have not really been able to do. If we want
Hmm.
to talk direct income over the last 5 years, I have made almost $500.
Wow, that's not much.
I know, but there's indirect indirect too, right? People do hire me for coaching and things like that because of the stuff that I put out. But in terms of, I really like to be able to do nothing but make content, and to do
Hmm.
that, I got to make that content, feed the dogs. So, but anyway, yeah, what drives me? That's it, I think. It's a mixture of those things. It's the desire to help, and it's the gratification I get both from performing and from when I do actually manage to help somebody, which of course you don't always do, but sometimes you do.
Well, you said something very profound in the beginning. You said you helped somebody some years ago. And what I've noticed is I don't always realize or don't always remember that. And some people come back to you and they say, well, back 2 years ago you did this and this was wonderful. And sometimes, to be blunt, I don't always remember these people. Sometimes I do remember, but I don't remember what I said. But but I do remember helping people, and I do remember doing these things, and I know that at some point things will come back. And that's what I recognize in the story that you do. We try to help people, and yeah, sometimes we forget because we continue with helping other people. But even if they don't immediately thank you for doing something, at some point it will come back. It always comes back, and it's not always the people that you think that will remember most that do. But that's again, that's not predictable, and that's not needed as well.
Absolutely right. It's not. Yeah, it's not nearly as simple as tit for tat. It's it's uh, yeah, like you say, people will come up to you. You don't have. I don't remember you. I don't remember that thing. I don't remember any of this. But something must have mattered, because now you come up to me 2 years later and tell me you think I'm a genius because I solved that thing for you, and that's pretty cool. I mean, there's risk, right? Because I know a lot of young coaches who are caught up in the rightness of their ideas. So they're so caught up in it that they are not so much helping other people as they are telling other people what to do. And that doesn't work very well, and that doesn't pay off nearly as well. A big if I know you've probably seen me say it before, but my definition of my job as a coach, what I do as a coach, is I create or exploit little tiny openings through which people can step to become closer to who or how they wish they were. And it's them that
Mhm.
are doing the
It's not
whipping,
so
not
much
me.
you telling them that's the direction, but asking questions and they find the direction that they need to go. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. That's it. And if I can create those little steps and they get to be, I mean, everybody's got a million better versions of themselves inside their head. If I can help anybody find a better version of themselves and step a little closer to it, that's a win. That's a huge win. And that doesn't have anything to do with, agility or test driven development or any of that stuff. It has to do with people, becoming themselves.
I'm basically allowing them to become that what other version. It's
Yep.
giving that permission. Yeah, that's something I recognize a lot, and this is probably also why we don't always realize what we've done because well maybe we just ask a stupid question and the light bulb comes up in their head and then they choose that new version of themselves and we don't realize that that was the question that was what they needed. And that's indeed I like the way you phrase it because like you say, especially when we're younger, and I'm pretty sure that I've done this mistake as well. I have a better idea and okay, I will sell TDD or I will sell something which I believe in, but that might not be the right thing for them, and asking questions make them actually discover what is the right thing for them.
Hmm.
That's that brings it. Um, it makes it also kind of hard to select and to answer probably that next question. But what do you consider your biggest achievement? Is there something that you say this is where I'm really proud of what I've done?
Well, I survived this long.
Hmm.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know what uh, I could list a lot of minor achievements,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure I could list a big one. Some of the things that I've done in my life that I'm most pleased with are, you know, being a grandpa, creating a safe space for kids where they could hang out. I because having I call it an open house, because having an open house was so important to me. And when I grew up, I've always maintained an open house for young people. And
Mm.
so the GPAW thing is part of that. It's all sort of smooshed together, but that involves creating a space for teenagers, really mostly teenagers. That's who I like. I like teenagers, um, to um, to experiment where they can't get hurt and they won't get yelled at for trying things. And
Mhm.
and I'm talking here about social things, about ways to dress, ways to talk, what to look at, what to think about, what's important, what's not. Creating that kind of space is a really cool thing, and I've done it several times. And that's not like some gigantic achievement, but it's one I'm very proud of. Um, I am,
And so what I'm hearing is it's an open space not just for your grandchildren, but basically for other children or other teenagers mostly that they could feel safe in.
yeah, absolutely. That they can, come here anytime, night or day. I don't care. Hang out with me, hang out with whoever else is here, and just practice becoming. I guess is what you would call it.
Which
And
is important for teenagers. That's really the age that you want to experiment in the world, and I think also for me as a parent, that's what I want my teenagers, yes, to discover themselves, but also do it in a safe place.
yeah,
So for me, that sounds like, okay, if there would be a place, okay, we live too far from each other, but if there would be a safe place for my children to visit, and that I know, okay, this is safe and this is where there's another person looking after them in a way, but in a non-controlling way, in a way like, okay, you can be who you want to be, and that is a very nice thing to do for other people.
yeah. I mean, and so I'm proud of it. I don't know that it's a gigantic achievement, and it isn't that hard actually. I happen to like those kids, so when you like people, it's no big deal to have them around hanging, and so there's that.
Yeah, but at the same time, teenagers can be sometimes a pain in the ass. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
having
yeah.
having a place where they can be, maybe for you it doesn't sound like a big achievement, but for them having such a place is an important part. So yeah.
Maybe. I hope so. I hope
Well,
so.
if people feel that they want to hang out with you, with a person who's not a relative, that definitely means something. Especially teenagers, they're really picky where they want to hang out with. So if they
Especially,
can do
yeah, especially with old people, right? Hanging out.
exactly that,
Yeah, yeah.
if they want to feel with stay around with you, that means that yeah, you created something that is
Mhm.
indeed something to be proud of. So yeah, well, I like that. It's not something that I typically hear in these questions in this video, but that's exactly why it's good to hear these kind of stories. So thank you for sharing this.
Cool, cool. Glad to.
I'm going to go to that next question. Like, is there so what I've noticed, one of the things when I created this video sharing is that a lot of agilists, what I've noticed is that we all have some kind of ways of how we deal with the world. And so I realized it's really good to share that. Is there some way of you, how do you work, that you want to share with the rest of the world?
Hmm. Well, so and this is a little technical, but I do a
Mhm.
lot of spikes. I do way more spikes than most people seem to do. I for
Just
those
for make sure that everybody understands, what do you call a spike?
Yeah. So a spike is a period of time when I am playing with my source code, when I'm changing and editing my source code in various ways. And during that period of time, there's only one rule.
Mhm.
You can't keep it. You
Okay.
can't keep what you did. The idea is that my programming practice is fairly disciplined, with test-driven development and refactoring and obsession with naming and all of that stuff, right? But sometimes what I need to do is not do those things. Sometimes I need to
Mm.
move as fast as I can to try to understand a problem and ignore all of the usual sorts of behaviors that I would use for discipline. And so I think of it as this way: I go off road. I go, I'm driving down the road and then I go off road. Maybe, maybe for half an hour, maybe for 3 hours or 5 hours. And then I get back on the road. And the only rule is you can't keep anything you made while you were off the road. Because the point of going off the road is to change this, not your source code, right?
Mhm.
It's to increase your it's to improve your understanding, and it's also to give you confidence. You can't see it. It's also to give you confidence. It's to give you heart. So that's what you bring home from a spike is your mind and your heart. You don't bring home the code. And
So you bring down home the experience. You learn something in your. That's what you said in your head. You
Yep.
bring down the experience. This is what's in your heart. You throw away basically everything. You start all over
Yep.
with all the good practices that you said. Then you do start to do TDD. Then you start to do
Mhm.
everything the right way, whatever that means.
Yeah, and I do that a tremendous amount of time. I mean, I bet I do it 3 times a week if I'm programming every day for a week. I bet I do
Mhm.
that at least 3 times during that stretch of a week. And most people don't do that, and I don't know why, but maybe because they never tried it. But for me, it really helps me to. I mean, it's just code. Typing is the easy part of this job. I don't mind typing and throwing stuff away. But the hard part of the job is thinking. The hard part of the job is feeling good, right? Is having the confidence to write something you haven't written before. And to get to those, I'm perfectly willing to type a bunch of crap and then throw that away. And I do that a lot. I use it to discover paths of tests that I can write. I can write these tests in this order to get to that endpoint, even though I didn't use any of that to get to that endpoint. I broke all the rules to get to that endpoint. Now I throw away the endpoint and apply the steps that I learned on my way. I use it to try out crazy refactoring ideas or to experiment with. I'm big into writing DSLs, um, and um, and so I want my code to read as much like the business as I can. And so
Mhm.
I'll spend an afternoon just experimenting with different syntax ideas in my programming language to see if they actually express the business problem as cleanly as and coherently as possible.
I
Anyway,
like that you because you well, a lot of people know you for talking very often about TDD and refactoring and lots of these things, and so that's well, a very disciplined agile. Many people that don't know an agile are always surprised how disciplined agile is. Agile is really for me one of the most disciplined things if you do it correctly with all the technical things, but and many people do either they do cowboy coding, they don't do anything, and then they have a hard time going to agile. But what you described is that you actually do both parts, but at different moments. And very important, if you're on the chaos part, or if you're on off-road like you call it, you throw away the code. And I think that's um, for many people very hard, because they've
mhm.
worked, I don't know, for a few hours, like you say, maybe 5 hours, and you would throw everything away. Well, yeah, because well, maybe I have an idea why you do that, but could you explain it a little more? Why is it so important to throw that away?
When I'm trying things, my behavior isn't in a straight line. It's a tree. I'm walking out on this branch. Maybe I'm coming back and walking out on this branch, this branch, this branch, this branch. Now I finally get there, and the thing that I actually needed is a line that goes through that tree, not all of that other stuff. But all of that other stuff is there in my code base because I put it there on my way to discovering that line. That's why I don't keep it, is because I I I want to be deliberate when I program. I want to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And I don't want to do, inspect each line of the code that I spent 5 hours just randomly trashing. And of course what I do when I first started doing this, I tried to spike using some of my discipline. And then it was
Mhm.
only over time that I decided, you know what? Nothing, no rules. You want a global variable? Make a damn global variable. You want to make a global variable called X? You go, girl. There are no rules because you're not going to
Okay,
keep it, so it doesn't matter.
and so what I'm hearing is that there might be other people that say, well, Chipa, you just created that, and you have all these others. Why don't you clean up the rest? And what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm checking, but what I'm hearing you say is actually it's much faster if I throw everything away and restart all over with everything in my head. I know now the path that I want to take. So
Yep.
now I do TDD, I write the test, I go there, I write another test. So I basically create the multiple parts of the line until I get there.
Yep.
And what I'm hearing is this goes way faster than looking at the branch and then cleaning up everything, because cleaning up is a lot. Well, if you
It
have
is.
to clean up a mess, it takes a lot longer. That's what I'm hearing.
It is. I think that you put it very well. It's just faster to toss it, because we come back to this, right? Typing. Kevin Henney says typing is not the bottleneck,
Yes, exactly. And
and who cares? It's a couple hours of typing, and I didn't type continuously for 2 hours. I thought, and I tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other thing. So it's not even that I'm throwing away 20 pages. Usually it's usually more like 3 pages of content spread around 15 different places. It's also true that when I spike, sometimes what I'm doing is I'm not even, it's not so much that I'm not in the production code, although sometimes I do a spike somewhere else. um, Not long ago I had a situation where I had a um, mm, commodity price collection gathering where you merge all these various reports into single data points. And the merging rules were really complicated. And this is all taking place inside a program that's, itself pretty damn complicated. So I just opened up IntelliJ, copied like 2 classes from the source code into my app, and then spent the next 3 hours playing around to see if I got this merge thing able to work with completely made up structures and data. I didn't even, other than those 2 classes, I didn't use anything that's actually the real thing, because the abstract level was capable of being expressed just by having any number and a date. If you had those 2 things, you
okay.
had enough to solve the problem. So I built I built a version of the code that didn't even interact with the production code.
And
Um,
because you know you're going to throw it away, it doesn't matter.
yeah,
That's what I'm hearing. And
yep,
if you would wanted to keep it, you would probably have to experiment within that whole complex situation, and it would have taken you much longer to figure that one out on top of everything else. So,
right.
so
And
now it's much
and of
easier.
course I
Yeah.
would have been broken longer. That's the weird thing about it. People don't understand too. The production code would have been broken for much longer, uncheckable inable, because I was still figuring out how to solve the problem.
Yeah,
By
of course.
by doing the spike, I figured out how to solve the problem. Now I just have to solve it, which takes much less time. And so the production app is broken for much less time while I solve that, and then I chuck it in.
Because yeah, the solving part in your head, it's already solved. You just only need to implement it in the correct way.
Yeah,
And that's nice. It reminds me also a little bit, and I want to check if that's true. It kind of reminds me a little bit of what you did with your acting, because of course, if you're acting, if you want to learn a new play, in my fantasy, actors are just talking for a long time when they're rehearsing, and you don't record every conversation. You
that's
just
right.
keep practicing, and at some point you say, okay, this feels like it's okay. Now we're going to write down the script. Is
Yeah,
that similar?
yeah, I think it is similar to that. I think they're related for sure, for sure. So I guess that's my personal agility tip. I would say that if you're practicing a high discipline model like extreme programming or something like that, consider it. Give it a try. Just say, I will mess around with this for 90 minutes, and then I will hit get reset dash dash hard. Throw it all away and do it
And
my
do it
discipline.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice way. And I think it might help a lot of people who are struggling with the disciplined way, because a lot of people, when they move from whatever they were doing to a disciplined uh, way of working like extreme programming, they might struggle because they miss that other part. And what you're saying is that you actually do both, but at
Yeah.
different times.
Yep.
That's really powerful. I never thought about that, to do that much more deliberate. So thank you for sharing this.
Cool. Cool.
Let's go to that next part. We talked already a little bit about the world has changed completely. I think even before that, you were also working remote, because I think you did a lot of remote work in your life, right? Um,
Uh, yeah, a fair bit. I mean, the last 2 years has certainly not been particularly new for me. But in the old day, I mean, I was on the road for 30 years, probably somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the time. I've
so
been,
how do what is something that you can teach younger, well, younger or older people about remote work? What is something that you like to do, or that helps you to work?
I would just say relax.
Mm.
I'll tell you something. People say, I've been in a lot of remote meetings. I've seen a lot of cats, dogs, husbands, wives, and children come and mess up a meeting. And yet, I have never seen anybody do anything in the rest of the meeting except go, right? And you see it over and over and over again. You see this. You're in a meeting and the cat goes, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump. And everybody's like, oh, a cat. People worry so much about, I have to look like so, it has to be quiet, I have to be, and it's like, yeah, not so much. Don't worry so much. You look fine. That looks like a cute cat. Oh, is that your little girl? Look at her. I've had some absolutely wonderful times in these last 2 years, now that I'm not the only one of us remoting. Um, just meeting people's family.
Mhm.
It's like you feel like, oh my God, I know this person so much better because I know their family. And
Exactly. Before you were all both, maybe both in the office, or everybody is in the office, and we only knew small part of it. And we kind of knew that we only knew small part of people's world, but that was all work that was available. And now we have, like you say, many people I didn't even know if they had cats, dogs, if they had, yeah, if they had a partner, if they had children. And not now, I meet the children, like you say, I meet the cats and dogs, and yeah, sometimes it takes a little while, but again, it brings so much more value
it
to
does.
letting to know, learn a real person.
The
uh
Yeah, I think that every so often you see these big announcements. Actually, it wasn't that long ago I saw a big story about they studied I don't know, some ridiculous number of people, 200,000 people, and their remote work situation and their habit. And they drew all these conclusions about remote working. And I'm not going to say whether they were positive or negative conclusions because it doesn't matter. Because you know what? The last 2 years have not been about remote work.
mm,
The last 2 years have been you are stuck in your house. People are
yes.
dying around you. You do not have a home office. You do not have a viable rig like I do for making video conferences. You don't have anything. Your wife or husband is stuck in that house too, as are your kids, as are your cats and dogs. And that is not remote work. That is hiding out during a pandemic. My guess would be that if you were hiding out during a pandemic, your productivity is going to go down. And it doesn't matter whether it wouldn't matter whether we were all in the office 24/7 hiding out during a pandemic or whether we were all at home hiding out during a pandemic. Either way, you can't really conclude anything about is remote work better, is face-to-face life better. You just can't we can't draw any conclusions. That's a
Yeah,
thing.
I have some. Well, this is not the first time that it comes up on this series. That I think what I used to say is that it feels much more like that we're living at work than that we're working at home. Because, like you say, we're hiding out, and on top of that, like you say, we don't have the right equipment. You and I were both independent, so we buy all the stuff that we think were needed. But a lot of people that are employees, they barely got their laptop from work, and they don't have the correct internet. With, then, I don't know, in my house, that's children, or five, no, not five children, three children, but five people that need to have an internet connection, that need to do video conversations and whatever for school and work all at the same time.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
that has an influence on a lot of the things that we're doing. So that is, yeah, I like that you say that, because indeed a lot of the conclusions that people are taking, it's like, now we know we're remote. No, not really. Let's actually, I think once the pandemic is really over, then we can start to think really serious about, okay, we've seen parts of remote work working. Let's now do it sincerely, and hopefully we also invest a little bit in the hardware for the people, and then we can make conclusions about that. That's really a powerful message to bring.
I think so. I mean, I think the case for remote working is pretty good. I also think that, whenever I teach people to pair, right? One of the first things I tell them is, you are not expected to be good at this.
Mm.
People are not born able to be good pair programmers. They learn how to do it. They practice it. They get better at it. People are not born to be good remote workers or good office workers. And most of them who are good office workers became good office workers by practicing and participating and learning what makes a physical office work. We haven't really done that very much with remote. And yet, we're if we I mean, I think more of us have done it over the last 2 years than ever before in terms of developing some of that skill. But it takes talent, it takes skill. I don't know. I live in an aging hippie community, and during the pandemic, we had our monthly meetings over Zoom, and these are bright, energetic people, and my God, they sure sucked at Zoom. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. They talked over each other all the time. The sorts of things you can get away with in a face-to-face meeting, like over talking or
Mhm.
interrupting or visually signaling your discomfort or whatever. None of those things work effectively in Zoom. They just don't work. And and it took them a long time to get good at just finish your sentence and then wait instead of you know talk talk talk
Keep
talk talk talk.
rambling on. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And like you said, we kind of forget, like, well, I'm 50 year old. That means that I've kind of worked like 30 years in an office or something like that, and I kind of forget how it was when I first started working. It was an adjustment. It wasn't just going from studying to working. There was also about office life and what does it mean? How do you
Mhm,
behave inside an office? I
mhm.
gradually learned all of that stuff. And of course, we need to learn the same thing about remote work. That I really like that observation that you make, because we keep forgetting that, and we sometimes think when people are new in the office, but that's just one or two people who joined it, and okay, they're young, and we don't always realize that, hey, this is new skills that these people need to learn, and all of a sudden, the whole world had to learn this new skills about
Yeah,
remote working,
like
and there
overnight.
were no, exactly, overnight. And on top of that, there were no books, and nobody's experienced, or the experienced people, there were a few experienced people, but not in all companies. And yeah, so that's really, and now actually I would say we need to do it again, because what I see is we go back to the office, but we also don't want to leave alone remote work. So now we need to figure out how hybrid work is working, and we haven't really figured out how remote works.
Yeah,
So
and I
so
I
this.
worry the hybrid arrangement. I've been in a lot of hybrid situations. Very few of them have gone well.
Mhm.
It is really hard to do the in-person practice and the remote practice at the same time. And I worry a lot. I mean, I've sat in meetings where there were four of us zoomed in and 20 in the room, and the four of us were basically dead quiet.
Mhm.
And there was no way to get anybody's attention. Half the time, you could not even hear who was speaking or see who was speaking in the meeting room. That's hard. I don't know what we're going to do to come up with better rigs for that and better practices for people so that they can actually pull that off. That's going to be a challenge.
Well, that is one of the things that I'm working on a new book. You know, my tips from the trenches book. I'm working on a new book for hybrid work, and that's exactly one of the reasons why I'm working on that, because I feel that this is something we all together still need to discover. Because,
Mm,
like you say, remote, we kind of worked it out, but that's also because we already have a few companies that have been doing remote for 10 or 20 years. But the real hybrid work, almost nobody has done it, and there is just no experience. And the current answer to that question of remote of hybrid work is don't do it. But I think that's just because we haven't figured it out. I think
agree.
it's possible to do that, but we just don't know yet how. And probably in 10 or 20 years, people will look back and say, well, these people after the pandemic, they had no clue. But for me it's interesting times, because like you say, we need a way to figure out, hey, these four people who are remote, how can we bring them in? We haven't heard you. I think one of the solutions that I heard, and I don't know if it's the best solution, but the best solution I have currently is that have a facilitator for the remote people and have a facilitator for the in-person people, and to make sure that these people communicate so that we can say, hey, wait a minute, there is still four remote people. How do we deal with that? And that kind of thing. But there is a lot to discover there. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's a new world again.
Yeah. Again.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Yeah, we keep discovering all new things. Okay, I want to go to the next question. That is, what is a book you have read that you want to share with us? Because I know I think I know that you read a lot of books that you like to read. And is there something, one that you say, hey, this is something I read recently that I want to share?
I am an obsessive reader. I mean, like crazy reader. I probably read, I don't know, 50 books a year, if not more.
Wow.
I
Okay.
read very widely. I read almost nothing in our trade. There are occasional
Hmm.
exceptions to that, but almost everything I read is history or fiction or um, about some subject that I don't know anything about. And I know a lot about geekery, and I don't really need to read all that much about it anymore. So I don't.
Because you
I
read so
did at
much
one
about
time, but
it
I
in the
don't much
past.
anymore.
Exactly. So
And I get
what's the
crabby,
book?
right? You read somebody in the computer world who's saying some stupid thing, and you're like, "This is stupid!" Wham! Throw the book away.
But then it's better
I
to read
recently
something
read,
about something you don't know about, because then you can get crabby
yeah,
because you don't know it better. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I recently read Ellie Mistal's "Allow Me to that one. Allow Me to Retort: A Black Guy's Guide to the Constitution." Mistel is a legal commentator for MSNBC. MSNBC's politics are very left, and they get uh, pretty obnoxious. I think they see themselves as sort of an anti-Fox,
Hmm.
but I really like Mistel, and I like his style. I like everything about him. And this book was very interesting to me because he basically um, using this sort of mixture of, I don't know, coarse language and high analysis that actually I like to do as well.
Hmm.
He talks about the Constitution, and he mostly attends to an
The
initially sort of a
Constitution of the United States, is
of
that
the U.S.
the
Yeah,
one? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Okay.
So the Constitution has amendments to it.
Mhm.
And he talks, the first 10 amendments came with the Constitution. They were actually made before the signing, and they are usually called the Bill of Rights. And so when people say that Americans have freedom of speech, they're referring to the First Amendment. When they say that, I don't know, I'm not going to get the amendment number right. Uh, oh, well,
The
doesn't matter.
guns, the guns.
Yeah,
That's an
that's the
important one in
Second
the
Amendment.
United States.
Yeah, the Second Amendment is the one that talks about the guns. And so there's these first 10, and he kind of goes through them fairly quickly. And then very little happened until after the Civil War in the US, which was in 1860. And then we got quite a few more. And he is talking about what the Constitution means, and he believes, and I agree, that um, um, a great deal of constitutional law is about either purposeful or mm, inadvertent, or some mix of those, racism. And so and in fairly rough tones, I give you fair warning, he's talking about how the Constitution has been used for 230 years as just another way to enact American racism, which is a challenging point, and I think a very good one, and a very accurate one. I think it helps. It helps if you think about it, even if you don't agree about every detail. It helps to be thinking about these things. I know it's hard for our international viewers to appreciate, but the American race problem is a staggeringly difficult problem, and it is really something. And you
Yeah,
know,
well, that's one of the things I discussed. Well, not well. I don't know exactly when, but well, you had your first black president some years ago, and I think, in a sense, maybe it was good and it was way too long, but before it came, but at the same time, maybe too early, because I think the whole Trump thing came as a counter reaction to that, because a lot of Americans were, well, are just inane racists, in a sense, and the whole society is very white driven, I would say,
yeah.
in a way. And like you say, probably I don't know the Constitution as well, the American Constitution, so I can imagine that a lot of that was written, well, by white people by definition, because you only had like the
Oh,
first white president, so, black president, some earlier.
well, I mean, the Constitution and the first 10 amendments were not just written by white people; they were written entirely by white landowning, slave owning men.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
So not just
just that
racist,
simple
it's
fact.
also sexist, I would say then, because
Yeah,
if you say
yeah,
men, I think also we see the same thing in America. Um, it's kind of interesting that you first had your black president before you had a female president.
yeah,
It's so it's not just pure racism. I think there's also a lot of sexism in your country.
absolutely,
Uh,
yes. I mean, don't
we
get me
see
wrong. I love my country. I really do. I think we have some amazing attributes, but these problems are very deep and very severe. And anything I can read or hear or see that helps me understand the complexity of this problem and what I, even just as a regular old white guy, can do to help ease the difficulty. Anything I can get that helps me with that is a win. And this book helped me with that.
Well, I think it's partially why I really believe also that, we white old men, we have to be part of the solution to tell, okay, like, okay, tell it like it is, and when we see these problems, that address it. And we can't, I cannot understand the full problem without listening to women, without listening to black people, to understand part of, yeah, to understand these parts of the problem. So thank you, because it's, well, I don't know enough about your country and your constitution, But that's one of the books that can help me and people that want to understand the United States a lot. So thank you. That's interesting. Okay, I want to go to that next question. Is that what question do you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer? For me, that's one of the most interesting questions to learn about. Okay, other kind of things that I could ask people. So,
Do I advocate any particular method for producing software professionally? Is the question.
mhm.
And the answer is no.
Oh, and is there more to that? To why you say no?
Sure. Um, Virtually all of these methodologies uh, focus mostly on the wrong problem, and
Mm,
they spend way too much time on structural issues that really aren't not nearly as much a problem. There's a thing that happens whenever you criticize. I'm going to invent off the top of my head a nickname for some agile system. I'm not actually looking for a
mhm.
fight.
Yeah.
Let's call
Okay.
it SaaS. Let's say
Mhm.
when you see a SaaS installation, and an installation is usually the right word for these sorts of things, uh, and you see that it's not working, or you participate in it and it doesn't work, and you complain to the SaaS people, inevitably, SaaS defenders will say, it's because you're not healthy. If you guys were just healthy, then SaaS works perfectly. Well, that's the problem, isn't it? That none of these methods work very well if you're not in a healthy organization with a healthy community of healthy people interacting with each other. If you're
But if it's healthy, then you probably don't need SaaS or
exactly,
whatever.
exactly, that's the thing, right? So that's why I say, yeah, don't adopt a method. Work on health. Work on health, mental health, emotional health, interactive health, communicative health, all of that. Work on that. Don't worry about a method. You know, and then when it comes down to even my beloved XP, and I'm a hardcore extreme programmer, even my beloved XP, it's like I don't. The only reason XP worked for me when I have done it is because I'm in a community. I'm in a community, and we love each other and we interact and we work together, and that's why it worked. In fact, that's the thing I think people don't understand the most about the pre-agile years. How much how much joy there was in that extreme programming community, regardless of the technique that we used, some of which none of us even use or advocate anymore, like story points. Um, but that wasn't the thing. The thing that drove us was what a wonderful time we were having with each other.
Exactly. Yeah, I like it. I want to go back a little bit to that previous part that you said, okay, I don't have a specific method. It reminds me of the answer. Well, when I originally created this series, that was in my blog post, and I asked the question also to Jerry Weinberg. And when I asked the question, what are you most proud of? He said, and it reminds me of your answer. He said, I'm most proud that I never created a methodology. And that's kind of the same thing. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's he said it's yeah, I agree so much with what you say. If everything is healthy, you don't need anything, and whatever thing it is, we need to make it work. And yeah, it's not about applying it correctly, whatever. No, it's about finding together. And I sometimes get the question, we want from a company that says we want to do agile by the book. And my question is, well, there's like 60 agile books behind me. Like, which book do you mean? Because they're all contradict each other by default, because you and I, we both have different experiences. We write our book without experience in a certain company, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you're a company, you need to write your own book, you need to write your own methodology and keep evolving it. And that's the kind of thing. And that SaaS or whatever that other
Yeah.
methodologies that exist, they were written by people that had a certain experience, and that's the thing. I really like that answer. That's really a powerful one that I think a lot of people can learn from. So thank you for sharing that.
Good.
That's a really wonderful one.
Good. I hope it
Um,
shakes some people up without actually starting a fight.
well, yeah, people can still feel offended if they want, but that then it's much more about them than it's about about you attacking them. Um, I want to go to actually that last question. Who do you think I should ask next? Is there a person that you think I should invite for a similar kind of conversation?
I looked at your at the list of people that you had already asked, and the people in your photo across
Mhm.
the Twitter thing. Not all of whom I know, although certainly I know most of them. And and I saw that you already had a lot of my first answers were on your
But,
list.
but but just to make sure, I've invited many of them. I have a list of 200 people, but I haven't invited everybody. So you can
Right.
still jump out a name,
Yeah.
because right now I've only published 12 people right now. So there still is a lot of option of the
Yeah.
things. But there's a lot of people in that picture that are on my list of 200 people.
Yeah.
Um,
So I actually thought about a person maybe who's not nearly as well known as many of those folks in the photo, but who's been doing it for as long. And Bill Wake is
hmm.
a gifted teacher and a terrific geek. And he's been in this world that you and I are in for as long as I have been, which is to say, over
Long
20
time.
years. And he doesn't have anything to sell. He's not selling a method or anything like that. He's just a really interesting guy who really knows his geekery. He really knows a whole lot about programming and code, and he's very good at explaining what he does know. Um, I read his blogs with great regularity, and I actually saw him by. It's so odd. You asked me, you gave me the prep questions.
Mhm.
I don't know, a month ago, and and I thought of Bill. Bill has lived about an hour away from me for about 2 years, and we have never seen each other. We've never
Hmm.
gotten together, which is ridiculous because we're old friends. And now he's just moved to Omaha, Nebraska, which is in the center of the country. But he had to come back to take care of some final business, closing his house and stuff like that. And so, just last week, he came over to my house and we saw each other for the first time um, since he's now no longer here. But anyway, yeah, I think Bill would be a terrific guest. I think he would be, a little different than the people who are, I don't know, famous for their expertise.
Well,
Well,
I like that way you introduce him, because for me, um, the whole idea with Who's Agile is, yes, of course, there is always these famous people because that's what people attract, and we all want to know more about them. But at the same time, I also want to have the people who are working in their small little corner, and some of them are famous in a small number of people. Like, yeah, I would say. Um, I always compare that to the famous musicians. They all look up to the same other musicians that nobody else knows, but
yeah,
they
right.
exactly, and so I can. That's the kind of thing. These people I definitely also want to invite, and at the same time, I also want to invite all these starting musicians, all these starting agilists that nobody knows and that they're still in their corner. Because for me, Who's Agile is about all of that whole community. And some people, like when I originally created the book version of Who's Agile, some people have left our community, and that's fine because they're busy doing other stuff. Like you left acting and stuff like that, and that's fine, um, because that's also what the world is about. Um, I like that you mentioned Bill, because well, some people might know him from. I think he's the person who invented Invest. I think that's one of the things that he invented. So some people might know him from that. But like you say, he's writing very interesting things on his blog, to make people think. It's one of the things that, I don't read many blogs, but sometimes things just pass. Probably because you share it on Twitter or others. But that's yeah, that's it's again. And it's definitely one of these people when I run into. Well, I haven't been to conferences in the last 3 years for obvious reasons,
Yeah,
but when we go back, that definitely I'm always interested to talk to. So thank you for inviting him.
cool.
It's I'm looking forward to talking about him. So then the only thing that left me is asking you, what are a good way for people to contact you? How can people get in touch with you?
I'm very easy to reach. I am on Twitter virtually every
That's
hour at which, yeah, I'm awake. And I mean, I'm let's see. There, it's over on my other screen, and it has been running this whole time. I haven't been looking at it because I've been having a good conversation with you, but I'm easy to reach that way. And then I have my own site that has my blog and contact information and stuff like that. That's
that's this one.
geepawhill.org. Yeah, yeah, and that's how to get me. And you can always drop me a line. I'm Geepaw or Geepaw Hill or anything that even faintly resembles at geepawhill.org. It will get to me. And of course you can always ping me on Twitter. So
And that's like you say, well, very reachable, very easy to interact with. And like we said earlier on, you see is what you get, so you will know what you are.
yeah,
You will get it, and like I say, I really appreciate that. I mean it. It's not. It's something that you immediately know where you are, and yeah, that makes you, for me, very human. I know some agilists that will maybe be too how would I say it, too polite, and then you don't really know after a conversation, was there something wrong. Sometimes you feel that there's something. With you, I never have that. With you, I really have this is a real conversation I have with a real person, and that's what I like so much about it. So thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful conversation. Again, much longer than I originally intended when I started
yeah.
this blog, but that's the case with all these good conversations. So thank you very much for your time, and well, I hope to see you again in person sometime, very soon.
Cool, cool. Thank you very much for having me, Eve. It was a really great conversation, and I hope people enjoy it.
I hope it too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.